The Standard Deviations podcast is a weekly production that looks at money, mind, and meaning, all through a psychological lens. Each week, psychologist and New York Times bestselling author Dr. Daniel Crosby interviews a fascinating new guest, experts in everything from finance to literature to wellness.
When was the last time you splurged on something when you knew it probably conflicted with one of your financial goals, like paying down debt or saving for future fun in retirement? Well, if you do this, you're not alone. It's because of present bias, or to use the psychobabble term, hyperbolic discounting. As humans, we have a tendency to let the immediate rewards of the here and now win out over a desired future reality. To learn more, check out the Cash Dash Dash, a planning tool brought to you by the Guardian Network to see just how much your short-term spends might be impacting your longer-term financial goals. Play today by visiting www.livingconfidently.com/play. Hello and welcome to the Standard Deviations podcast. I am your host, Dr. Daniel Crosby, and I am joined today by Chau Lai, a financial representative at the firm that bears her name. We are going to talk about the extraordinary combination of circumstances that led her to where she is today and how she executes her mission to help clients appreciate life by grounding them in financial realities while building on life's possibilities. Chau, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So talk to me about this mission. I read that mission statement again and again when I saw it. It strikes me as really poetic and beautiful and important. So how do you simultaneously ground your clients in the reality of today while helping them dream about tomorrow's possibilities?
Well, it's a great question. And I do that by first helping them to understand their journey, how they got to where they're at. So at the beginning of the process, I have a meeting called the Vision Clarifier meeting. And you would think from that title that we're talking about where they're headed. But I feel like you can't really know where you're headed until you understand how you got to where you are. So a lot of the questions I ask my clients is really helping them to understand where their what the journey was for them and what were the big lessons in their lives, and really to appreciate how far they've come, and also to help them be more aware of their relationship with money as it relates to how they learned about money growing up. So we talk a lot about their past in order to get them ready to dream about the future. And so the grounding is to get to a place where you complete the past, you celebrate, the lessons, and then you move forward. And so that's what I mean by that.
That's perfect. So I was just interviewed for a piece in the Wall Street Journal about love and money. And in it, I talked about money scripts, like the money scripts and values that we grow up with, the experiences and the events that shape us. And we don't have to be defined by those things, right? They don't have to own us. They aren't exhaustive of who we are. But until we understand those money scripts and those money values, we can't be truly free of them. So I want to talk to you about your money scripts and your growing up. And the beginning of the story is quite incredible. Because it begins with you and your family fleeing Vietnam when you were just 2 years old. This is you, your parents, and your brother fleeing Vietnam at the age of 2. Now, you're, of course, too young to remember, but what have you heard about that experience of fleeing at such a young age?
Well, so I am very fortunate that I don't remember the details. I do have images of certain points in the journey. So we fled by boat at night, and the plan is to get as far out at sea as possible without the Viet Congs finding you or discovering you, because then they would shoot you or take you to prison, or re-education camp was what they called it. So imagine escaping with a 2 and a 1-year-old in the middle of the night, and your escape route is to go from shore to a boat that's docked offshore, and you don't swim. And that was the situation with my parents. So I think my life started very excitingly like that. And miraculously, we did get on the boat and we floated out to sea because we were ran out of food. We got pirated. So we really had nothing left. One of the images I remember was a lot of water because we were just out at sea, and then a big gray mass, and that was a U.S. Navy ship, is what I learned later. We were drifting next to a U.S. Navy ship, and they picked us up and got us to a refugee camp in Malaysia, and so the U.S. Navy rescued us. And spent 2 years there in refugee camp, and so there I remember lots of rats. So I'm deathly afraid of rodents, and it was very dirty, and resources were scarce. So I'm a huge germaphobe because of that. So and I have terrible seasickness and motion sickness. All of them, I'm sure, came from that. But what I also learned from that is when we got to America, we were sponsored by my uncle. And I often say that I won the refugee lotto because my uncle somehow escaped and got to San Diego. And that's how we got to San Diego. So, I mean, it could be anywhere else, but I got to San Diego. So I definitely won the refugee lotto there. And, some other images of childhood at that time is we came with nothing. Parents couldn't speak English. They spoke Vietnamese, and my mom spoke French because it was a French colony. And Vietnam was a French colony. And we were in a little apartment with 4 refugee families. And as a child, I remember standing in front of a refrigerator. I was 4 by this point, and my mom had the door open, and she pulled out the vegetable tray at the bottom of the refrigerator, and she pointed to it, and she said, "This is our food. You can eat what's in this drawer." And then everything else in the refrigerator, she kind of waved her hand across it and said, "This is not our food. You cannot eat this." And she looked at me and she said, "But I'm working really hard so that you can eat everything in the refrigerator." And my mom worked in a little sewing factory, and she was paid, nickel, dimes, and quarters. The faster she sewed, the more money she made. And she kept her promise because we did get out into our own apartment, and and we had our own refrigerator. So those are so when I think about where I came from, it's I remember not having much. And then I remember how hard my mom, and I said my mom because my dad would be the opposite. He wanted to stay in Vietnam. He said, "Well, why would we leave when the Viet Congs are taking care of us?" i.e. they were giving us food rations because we lived in the South, and when the Viet Congs took over, they confiscated everything. So my dad didn't want to leave because he thought, well, we're, going to be taken care of by the government. So we have a communist. My mom was a capitalist for sure and wanted to leave and start a new life in America. And my dad was fine with whatever he was given. So I grew up with very conflicting money scripts, let's say. So it was a great contrast. And growing up, I guess I got to choose which script I followed.
So you've painted an incredibly vivid picture here, and I thank you for your candor. It's an incredible story. You've painted this picture of early on the want, living with relatives, a father who was sort of ideologically rooted in communism, a mother who was more of a capitalist. A lot of things coming together. You've got the whole immigration thing and having survived a period of real scarcity and want and, even danger. When I look at, my own family, I remember years ago being on a walk with a relative who had lived through the Great Depression. And I spotted a coin on the ground, like, a nickel. And she was like, "Well, you should pick it up." And I'm like, "Nah, it's dirty, no thanks." And she sort of stopped and grabbed me by the shoulders and was like, "You will pick that up. You will not waste money," because her experiences had shaped her thusly. You've started to touch on it, but how did this convergence of communism and capitalism and these periods of want, how did this come together to sort of shape your family's notions of money? And how would you describe those notions of money or wealth?
So, so that was when I was 4. And then when I was 6, my parents divorced. As you can imagine, the conflicting ideology just made it not possible for them to stay together. And then my mom met my stepfather, and they were very aligned philosophically as it relates to work ethic and money and wanting more of it. My stepfather also, he was actually caught and put in re-education camp, and he escaped and then found himself in San Diego as well. So the two of them working together built actually quite the American dream. So as I grew up living with them, I got to see what money gives you. So, they started with nothing, and then they bought that sewing factory that my mom worked in, and then they bought a second one. Then they started buying, started a restaurant, then real estate, and then ultimately a jewelry store. And so on the outside of our, looking in, you could say that we lived the American dream. Like every year it seemed like we were moving to better neighborhoods, bigger homes, got better cars. So it looked good on the surface. And then what was happening inside our home and witnessing as a child and experiencing it was very self-destructive. They fought about money constantly, and the fights were violent, physically, emotionally, psychologically violent, because they were both, they had escaped the war, but they were still running and they were still in fear, and they had never dealt with it. And so the more they had, the more they were afraid they didn't have enough, and they never felt safe. And it was not a good environment, let's say, I'm the oldest of 4, and my stepfather was very physically and emotionally and psychologically violent with my brother and I. And my brother left when he was 14 to live with his friend's family. And I left when I was 16 because I got a scholarship to study abroad in Barcelona as a high school senior. And that was my ticket out. Education was my ticket out of that crazy household. And when I left, I swore that I would never return. And then as a 16-year-old, I really had to figure out how I was going to take care of myself, because I was not going back. And my dad, my real dad, my biological dad, had no capacity to provide for himself, much less for us. So it was really, so that was also a pivotal moment. But just witnessing what money can take away from you when you're not clear about what your true purpose for money is, and when you live in fear of never having enough, even when you have plenty, is something that stuck with me, and I swore would not happen to me. And then, unfortunately, when you don't deal with your emotional traumas, they come back, right? And so fast forward, I got a scholarship to study 4 years at UCSD. So 4 more years of school and housing until I could figure out food and housing until I could figure out what to do with myself. And, when I graduated with an economics degree from UCSD, I thought, oh my gosh, what do I do with an econ degree? So I, decided, well, I'm really good with money. And so I'll help other people be prudent with their money and build their wealth. Because while I was in school, I started buying real estate and investing myself. So I graduated with a lot more than most high school graduate or college graduates. So that was kind of the idea. And I focused from, for 10 years, a decade, I just put my head down and I just focused on building my business. And it was really at any cost. And at 34, I turned around and I went, I'm at finish. I mean, I checked all the bucket list things off of what it should be to be successful. And I felt so empty and lost in my life. Like, is this what it's all about? I mean, I'm making all this money, I have all these things, and I'm completely empty, and I have no idea how I got here. And that was when I started really looking at my life and realizing that I had become my parents. And even though I worked so hard to not be them, I had become them because I was living in fear of not having enough. And I was, working, anywhere from 50 to 60-hour days or work weeks, and just it was just never enough. I never felt safe. And that's when I started really looking at myself.
Now, it can be so hard to unlearn the lessons, I think, especially the lessons of childhood and young adulthood. So at this point where you realize you're sort of repeating the patterns that you witnessed in your, the home of origin, which is something we've all, found ourselves doing in one respect or another. Assuming I don't know the end of the story, but assuming you've been able to right the ship somewhat, how were you able to look at that pattern of using money as this crutch? And how were you able to arrive at a healthier, more robust idea of what wealth is and what wealth does?
Well, I'd like to say that it happened overnight, like I saw it and then I changed, but I'm a human being and we don't change as quickly as we'd like to change, right? But the first thing is awareness. So I was aware of what I was doing. And so then I started investing in I was aware that I was treating myself like a machine and I was running myself ragged. So I started by hiring a coach. And really a life coach. And I'd worked with consultants and business owner and business coaches before, but I thought, no, this is something this is about my life. And I need to really focus on coaching coaching that is focused on me enjoying my life. And I didn't even know what it meant to enjoy my life or what it meant to be happy at that point. But I knew that was what I needed to get clear. And I needed to also be freed of what happened in the past. And I'd gone through a lot of counseling, up to that point, but it was a different inquiry about how do I complete this past so that I don't continue to repeat it. And so that was the first thing. As I started investing in myself, I started treating myself like a human being. And I started having conversations with this coach about, what did I witness in the household, growing up? And what did I tell myself about myself, as a child? And just really dissecting it. And it took really over another 6 years for that work to help me to get clear about my relationship with myself, my relationship with money, my relationship with my husband at the time. And it was really painful. I looked at a lot of things that I didn't want to look at. And some of it I didn't want to deal with. And it got to a point where, the other pivotal moment was in 2000, at age 40 now. So I was 34 when I figured I got to the awareness and started working on it, but there was still so much rooted that it was hard for me to let a lot of things go and change. And so at age 40, I had another life-changing moment where I found out my husband at the time had been having affairs for 5 years. And then it was like, and then some other life things happened, but it really stopped me in my tracks. And now it was like, no, I'm not looking at this myself just to, for self-help. I'm looking at myself because this is self-survival. This is something went really, really wrong. And my life's off track. And I have a choice now on how I move forward with all this pain, with all this trauma. How do I move forward? And and get through this divorce and really become a different human being out of this. And that was the turning point, was really when I got divorced.
So, one of the reasons why I'm enjoying this conversation so much is just how candid, how upfront you are about everything. When I think about my favorite people in the world, I think they have, at least two things in common. They're very insightful about their own behavior, and they're very comfortable being frank with others about it. Now, you own this. This isn't just a like me and you on the podcast thing. I mean, you're very upfront about your own personal and financial journey, including immigration, divorce, near homelessness, the trials of being a small business owner, your own, having provided for aging parents, your charitable giving. You are like an open book with your clients. I think sometimes we think that in the professional sphere, it's our sort of duty to hang back. How do your clients receive all this candor? And what do you think the impact of this sort of candor is on your client relationships?
Well, you have to think about what we're asking our clients to do, right? When they come meet with me, they don't my clients are all introduced, so there is a relationship that connects us, but they still don't know who I am. And now I'm asking them to bare their soul, tell me about your life and your concerns and how did you get to this point? I'm asking them to be vulnerable. And finance is a very vulnerable thing for people because it's connected to so much else in our lives. And so if I'm asking my clients to be vulnerable and I'm not being vulnerable myself, then how is that? How do we really build a strong connection where they can really trust me and really want to be open so that I can really help them? So I think the key to being a successful advisor is to be vulnerable. Now you have, not every client knows every aspect of my story. I listen for where they're at, where they came from, and based on that, because I've had so much life happen and live so much life, I can draw from that and say, I understand where you're at. Here's where I came from, and here's what I learned, and here's how I got through that. And so that human connection, that I see you, I understand, I feel your pain too, I've been there. That's what makes it possible for a meaningful, lasting relationship, which is really what the opportunity is when you're an advisor, is to build lasting, meaningful relationships with people that trust that you can take them and, lead them to the future that they want, but they don't actually have the tools themselves to get there.
Yeah, it's incredibly well said. And I think the culmination, right, the very sort of natural endpoint of the life you've lived and the personal realizations you've had is that you now have a practice that prides itself on taking care of clients holistically, to include things like wellness, health, exercise, mental health. Do you think this is the future of the financial advice game, that financial reps, financial advisors are going to become more sort of holistic in their focus? Do you see this changing, or is this just sort of a you thing?
You know what? I think advisors have a choice. That's the beauty of our industry, is we have a choice on how we want to build relationships, right? And how we want to serve. And what offer of help we want to be in the lives of clients. So I hear all the time, we're competing against robo-advisors. Well, a robo-advisor is not going to be able to connect to a human being the way you can. But the only way you can connect to another human being is you stop being a robot. You stop being a machine. You stop treating yourself like a machine, and you realize that the other person, the person sitting across from you, they have emotions, they have feelings, and when you help them connect their decisions to their feelings and understand that, that's when you can move them to the direction they want to go, right? And so that's the opportunity that we as advisors have going forward, is that the more we can be connected to ourselves and understand, our own motivations, the better it will be at helping our clients to do that as well. And it is a choice. So I don't see every advisor doing it, but I see the ones that really want to have lasting, meaningful connections. That's the opportunity that we have, is to be able to do that. And, I can talk about health, with clients, because I used to work 60 hours on average a week, or more, actually. It's embarrassing to say how much I used to work. And, the first question one of my coaches asked me, my life coach who really changed my life, asked me was, well, what makes you happy? And I couldn't even answer that question, to be honest. And so I said, well, I guess I like yoga. I like yoga. Yoga, I guess, makes me happy. And he said, okay, well, how often do you go to yoga? And I said, every month or 3 or so. He said, wait, the one thing that you can tell me that makes you happy, you allow yourself to go every quarterly. Right. So that's why now I ask those questions of my clients and I catch them just like he caught me. But see, I couldn't do that with my clients if I hadn't had that experience myself. And so I do that with nutrition when we're talking, or health, whatever they share with me, I really listen for what they're wanting and what they're actually doing. And then I help them to be aware.
Yeah, what I love about your approach, I've studied, sort of the rise of AI a lot, and like what's coming with respect to AI and machine learning. And there's no doubt that there's things that, math does well, that machines do well, and even parts of the investment game, when it comes to allocating assets or creating a diversified portfolio, those are things that robo-advisors and algorithms can do extremely well. So in the face of that, how do we compete? Well, I think oftentimes we double down on the very thing that the machines are good at. We go, well, I'm going to be just as algorithmically sound as this machine is, where the trick is really to emphasize what we do best, which is shaping client behavior and becoming the most human versions of ourselves. I think the future of all sorts of industries is going to be about empathy, about connections, about relationship building, about creativity, and just doing things that the algorithms don't do well. We're never going to beat them at their own game. So we've got to win at ours. And, two things that I love about what you said, there's two sort of concepts from my world of clinical psychology that I think are at play. One of the things that we always learned when I was coming up in grad school is that you can really only take your clients as far as you've taken yourself. So we all had to go to therapy. In order to be good therapists, it was understood that you had to yourself go to therapy, because you could only take your clients as far as you've taken yourself. So I think that's a good thing for financial professionals to consider. And then the second thing that you've talked about is, without saying the words, is this concept of a wounded healer. All of the psychological research shows that people who have been through something, right, whether it's recovering from an addiction or, living through divorce or depression or whatever it may be, they are more skilled and more empathetic when they're working with clients who are going through that same thing. So rather than running from our experiences, rather than running from our scars, financial, personal, or otherwise, I think owning and understanding those things and just weaving them into the framework of how we go to market is the real answer. And that's something that I think that you've done seamlessly in your own practice.
Well, thank you. Yeah. And I just believe that you can't give what you don't have.
Sure.
And you can't teach what you don't know. Right. And knowing is actually having lived it yourself. And, when I also mentor other advisors, just as a way to pay it forward, because I've had, God's blessed me so much with really great mentors in my life along the way. And so now I do that for other advisors and kids who I also mentor students who are, you come from very abused backgrounds, like myself. And one of the things I say is, your story, the life that you've lived is going to be a gift to someone else if you're willing to share it, and not just share it, but share it from a place where you reflect on what the gift was that struggle was for you. And then you can be hope for someone else, and you can be light for someone else. But you have to do the work yourself. You have to really look at yourself and look at those points in your life where you just thought, there's no way I'm going to get past this. And then think about, and then just walk, trace your steps. How did you get through it? So that you can teach someone else.
So I'm going to give you an opportunity now to improve on one of my personal failings from my days of being a psychotherapist. As a therapist, I always had trouble getting people to follow common sense suggestions because they were often looking for a silver bullet. So my favorite example of this is that I had a young client present to me with complaints of anxiety. And so as part of the intake, paperwork and diagnostic piece, I would always ask questions about things like diet and exercise and sleep. And this client was drinking, 2 liters plus of caffeinated soda a day. This client was playing video games 5 or 6 hours a day, led a completely sedentary lifestyle, ate garbage food, just really was doing a lot of things that all by themselves would give you a panic attack. I mean, 2 liters of Diet Mountain Dew a day is enough to give you an anxiety disorder all alone. And so I sort of suggested like, hey, let's start with here. Start right here. We got to change your diet. We got to change your exercise. We got to change your social skills. And the client said to me like, look, I didn't come to a nutritionist, right? Like I came to a psychologist. So like, tell me the magic words that are going to make me feel better. And I effectively said, look, as long as you're putting yourself in such a bad spot, there's nothing I can say to you. And, we just didn't get very far. So when a client comes to you and you're seeing something that is ostensibly outside of the realm of finance, right? They're coming to you to get insurance. They're coming to you to pick some mutual funds and ETFs and help them, make good financial decisions. But you spot a money script or an issue of overwork or mental health issue. How are you able to counsel them in a way that's perhaps unexpected or not what they came to you for, but is still very pertinent to their financial life?
That's a great question, because I have a tendency, like a lot of professionals, to want to get into solution mode too, right? Prove how smart we are. Mm-hmm. And I've had to overcome that for myself because struggling with self-confidence and low self-esteem for a good part of my life, again, due to childhood, I always have that tendency of I got to show them how smart I am. And what I've learned is that's not helpful because it makes it about me, right? And what I've learned, and again, through the journey, is that when somebody is sitting across the table from me, that is, that person, that family is given to me by God, and I'm to steward them. And it's not about Chau, proving how smart she is and solving all their problems. It's about me taking care of them in a way that empowers them to take care of themselves. So the first thing is I slow the process down. So we, yes, we're there to talk about their money, but as I told you, the first conversation we have, which is an hour and a half, is all about clarifying your vision, which is really clarifying the vision of your past, like what happened to you in the past that got you here, before we can talk about where you're going and what you want in the future. And I think that conversation, that hour and a half, and it really starts with the 30-minute introduction talk that I have with them, where I start asking them a few questions. But really, that hour and a half where I start really diving into their lives. And then actually before that meeting, I give them a series of questions to prepare for that vision meeting. So because of the way that I've slowed my process down and I'm talking to them about everything but their money, it seems, but I'm also very clear, I set the context by helping them to understand the reason we need to go to this is I can't take you where you want to go financially until we're really, really clear about who you are and what motivates you to do the things that you do. Because that affects all your decisions in your life and definitely your finances. And I think that's been very helpful. And I didn't do that always in my practice. But again, the gift of divorce is I got a lot of time to reflect on what happened. And so I really changed my approach and my process to really slow people down so that they can really get to where they want to go safely.
I think what you've just talked about is the biggest secret in behavioral science, which is we spend so much time trying to come up with the correct set of prescriptions, right? Someone comes to us with a problem and we're going to have this elegant solution to the problem. We'll present this elegant solution to them. They'll embrace it with both arms, and then we're off to the races. Well, what's wild about human behavior is that 9 times out of 10, people know exactly what to do. Like the person that I was talking about, he knows he's not supposed to sit around and eat chips and drink Mountain Dew and play Nintendo all day. Like he knows that's not the recipe for a happy life. But what it takes someone doing is it takes someone understanding that person and caring for them and understanding for them, even in their, in the midst of whatever they're doing that's wrong-headed. Once people feel understood, once people feel accepted, more often than not, they'll make the change on their own. They don't need a lecture about what to do. I think most people are quite sensible and know exactly what to do. But it's only once they feel seen and accepted and respected that they're able to make that change. So that's a lesson that I've learned, but I feel like I have to keep relearning it and then remembering it as a parent and a husband, because I often forget it. But I think you've articulated it quite nicely. So Chau, you've set up your practice to allow yourself time to do charitable and philanthropic work. I'd love to hear a little bit about the causes that are near and dear to your heart.
So I really thought, drew from my own life experience, and I thought, wow, if I was a child, what would have, how would have been different for me if I had somebody in my life earlier in my life to guide me. So two causes that I really love and support are, one is the Reality Changers. It's a local nonprofit here in San Diego, and their mission is to help inner city kids be first generation college students. And that sounds like interesting, but what really is happening is they go into neighborhoods where the conversation about education is absent. Their parents are in jail, their parents are working 5 jobs to have life happen or provide support. And so they don't have, they're living in neighborhoods where there are more liquor stores than there are anything else. And a lot of them are in a very abusive households. So we find Reality Changers targets 8th graders. That's how soon we try to get them, who have 2.0 GPAs or lower. And these kids are, have really had not thought about anything beyond surviving the day. And in that process of working with them from 8th grade to going into college, there's self-development, there's certainly study skills, they get a mentor, they get, peer tutoring, they get peer support. It's a whole structure. And what I do with them personally is I'm a personal mentor. So I have 5 students that I mentor. Now only 1 is in high school. I started with them all in high school, and now, 4 are in college. I get to really talk to them about their life and what their struggles are, and share my own story and my pain, and be hope to them, and to encourage them. And so that's one cause. The other one is Girls on the Run. So I've coached 10 seasons of Girls on the Run. And it's an after-school program that teaches young girls. So we start with 8-year-olds, and then the older program, which I coached for 5 seasons of, is Heart and Soul. And so the younger girls are 8 to 10, and then we have the 10 to 12-year-olds. And it's a 10-week program to teach girls how to love themselves through physical running. So we do a 10K at the end, and most girls come and they have never run before and really don't exercise. And through that 10-week program, we go through, different lessons on, how to take care of your body. What's a healthy relationship? How do you pick healthy friends? And, very different things. And then we're also physically preparing them to run a 5K, and they have that triumph at the end of that they conquered something they didn't think they could conquer. And so I love that program because I could have really used it as a child. And then I also work with the San Diego Rescue Mission. So they have a 2-year program to help people who really want to overcome homelessness and overcome the challenges that got them on the street, and get their lives back. So I teach how money really works, and to give them a healthy perspective and relationship with money as they transition back into life. And then many other causes. I've gone on missions where it's medical missions, it's humanitarian missions, it's Christian missions, sharing God's love, and God's gospel. And I tell you this, that 5 years ago, none of this 5 years ago, none of this was in my heart. I was philanthropic. I wrote big checks to charities, but I was not giving of my time. And I realized that was not really giving. And now I still give financially, but I also give of my time, and I give of my talents, and I give of the influence that God's given me, all the gifts. So there are many other charities, so I won't go. Those are the 3 ones that really are close to my heart. And I'm a charitable planning specialist for 4 nonprofits here in San Diego. 3 of them I've listed for you. But and the idea is I want to help my clients. So I have these conversations with clients too, is once I help you understand you're financially safe, you're going to have enough, your family will have enough. What causes in the world do you want to make an impact? How do you want to be remembered? Let's think beyond your life. Where do you want to leave a lasting legacy beyond your family? And again, that's not a conversation that I would have had with clients 5 years ago.
So you've anticipated my final question. The research on money and happiness shows unequivocally that the giving money away is one of the best ways that we can sort of purchase happiness. When we say, does money buy happiness? And the answer is kind of. Well, one of the ways that it does buy happiness is by helping other people and being charitable. I think especially in the sort of hands-on way that you've modeled in your own life. But I also know that some financial professionals are very stern with their clients and say, look, don't you dare give any money away. until you sort of put on your own oxygen mask first. So how do you think about that and navigate that with your own clients who, before they're financially independent? Do you encourage them to sort of take care of themselves first, or do you get them started with a habit of giving in a small way from sort of the inception? How do you think about that?
Exactly what you said. Habit, right? Develop a habit of giving. And giving, if you're not in a place where you have financial surplus, right? You're still working on your sufficiency, is you give of your time, right? And you volunteer and you experience the giving by connecting with another human being. And that's why I work at the rescue mission. That's why I mentor. That's why I go on mission trips, so I can really look into the eyes of the people I want to help. So once you do that, the financial part of, giving, start with a small amount. So I always review clients' tax returns and see what is their habit of giving. And then, so that's an opportunity for a conversation. What are the causes that you care about? What are the things that move you in this world? Let's start a little bit, maybe you can just go volunteer. But then eventually, I always say, when I help you see that you are financially safe and your family's financially safe, what causes do you want to support? Where do you want to make an impact? So I'm already planting the seed at the beginning of the conversation, and I'm helping them to move towards it.
So it's a great thing. I think when I look at my own life, I think one of the ways that I deceived myself early on, I think, is by saying, look, if I had, so-and-so's money, I would be enormously charitable. If I had that person's wealth, man, I would give it all away. But I think when we do that, we sort of kick the can in a way that's self-deceptive and doesn't fully realize all the ways that we can help, whether that's giving of our time, our talent, our service, or candidly, for probably most people listening to this podcast, you've got more money than you absolutely need to put food on the table. And I think that there's more than we can do than we realize. And I think a lot of us sort of wait for that future date. When I have X in the bank, then I'll start to become charitable. I think it's enormously important to start to develop a philanthropic and a charitable practice and a charitable heart early on, even if that just means volunteering your time, because, you're just never going to turn it on. You're not going to flip that switch in your old age when you've hit your magic number. And we also know the research says that magic number tends to be elusive, right? That magic number, I think many people, once they hit it, it's not so magical anymore, and they move the goalposts. So I think it's great to start that giving habit today. So Chau, you've been incredible. You've shared so much of yourself and your heart and your mission with us. To close, we always have a bit of a speed round that psychologists call free association. So I'm just going to throw out sort of two phrases to you, and I just want you to say the first thing that comes to your mind. Okay? Question number one, what does true wealth look like to you?
Oh, that one's easy. I thought about that one a lot. So it's the ability to fully experience life. And that's Henry David Thoreau.
Man, I can't improve on that 1 ounce. I'm going to just let it go because it's perfect. And then here's a bit of a tricky question. Give us some hope, Chau. What will 2021 hold for the world?
Well, you know what? I think 2020 provided us with an opportunity to be really reflective on what is most important to us in our lives, right? What is really essential to live a good life, right? And I think that's we had the opportunity to ask that question of ourselves this year. So 2021 is, knowing what is essential and what is non-essential. We can develop new practices. And I think and it starts with the individual, it starts with the household, and then I think that'll ripple out to hopefully the government, but we don't want to wait for the government to save us, as my father would have done. What we really want to do is take responsibility for our own happiness, our future. And the opportunity of 2021 is to take all the lessons of 2020 and make some new choices.
Yeah, I really believe that as I've reflected on my own 2020 experience, which has had, I think, like probably most everyone, some high highs and some low lows. But when I think about my 2020 experience, I think one of the things that we know from the literature about human behavior that we don't prove out until crazy years like this is that you're capable of more than you think. I think we hear about a scenario and we go, oh my gosh, if that happened to me, it would break me. And I mean, if you had told me that my 2020 would look the way that it has, I would have said, there's no way. Like, how could I endure such a thing? But I've learned new things about myself, and I'm sure you have, and everyone listening to this has. So I love that challenge. 2021 holds taking the lessons of 2020, applying them in the new year, and learning from what has been a singular and a strange year, but doesn't need to be a bad year. It can be a real learning year and a real growing year. So Chau, this has been incredible. Thank you for all that you've shared with us. If people want to learn more about you, your practice, your approach, where can they find you online, or how can they get in touch with you?
So they can go to my website, chaulai.com. That's CHAULAI.com. And my contact information is there. They can also reach me at chaulai@chauqlai.com.
Perfect. Thank you again for sharing your insights with us today. They have been most profound and most valuable.
Thank you. I enjoyed every minute of it.
All opinions expressed by Dr. Daniel Crosby and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of or endorsement by the Guardian Life Insurance Company of America, Guardian, and its affiliates, subsidiaries, employees, and agents, including Park Avenue Securities and the Guardian Network. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for legal, tax, and investment decisions. The opinions are based upon information participants consider reliable, and Dr. Crosby and Guardian are not responsible for the consequences of any decisions or actions taken because of the information provided. Guardian copyright is a registered trademark of the Guardian Life Insurance Company of America. All materials are subject to United States copyright laws. Copyright 2020 Guardian. Chau Lai is a registered representative and financial advisor of Park Avenue Securities, LLC, PAS, 333 North Indian Hill Boulevard, Claremont, California, 91711 909 399 1100. Securities products and advisory services are offered through PAS member FINRA SIPC. Financial representative, the Guardian Life Insurance Company of America, Guardian, New York, New York. PAS is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Guardian Life Insurance Company of America, copyright Guardian, New York, New York. Pacific Advisors, Inc. is not an affiliate or subsidiary of PAS or Guardian. California Insurance License Number 0C08038. Guest speakers and their firms are not affiliated with or endorsed by PAS, Guardian, or Pacific Advisors, and opinions stated are their own. 2020-112993, expiration 12/22.